Ross Lewis, Agile Transformation Specialist and Executive Coach.
Thank you, thank you. Anybody here doing any academic work, like doing a research or an MBA? Put your hand up. I know you're doing an MBA. You're doing it. What are you doing, sir?
I'm doing my PhD.
You're doing your PhD. Oh. Anybody else? Masters, PhD?
Masters of Science.
Masters of Science. Well done. Well done. Anybody else? Anybody considering it? Talk to these people, right? It's a good thing. It's transformative. It teaches you, opens your mind up to a different way of thinking. And that's what I'm doing. So I spent, 25 years in professional practice, working with very large organizations, helping them transform, doing the managers don't seem to get it, the people at the top do, the people, and puzzling over all of that. And going through this process of thinking a bit differently, and not necessarily agreeing with the academic process, but just understanding it, has allowed me to think about this problem, which is, how can managers transform organizations? So, this is what I've developed through my research. And it's based on what I've seen, what I've done, and also now what I've read in the literature. So there's quite an influential researcher. He was Stanford, he was every great university in America. And he wrote a book called The Behavior of Firms. The behavioral theory is what he developed. And what he realized, he was interested in the way that people in organizations learned and how they spread knowledge within the organizations. And what he came up with is this, that most of the activities are either exploring new possibilities, you know this one, or exploiting, sorry about the word, old certainties. And the more you think about this, the more that you realize this is true, which is why this paper has become so impactful. It's one of the most cited papers in research. I will give you all these references if you email me afterwards. So for example, if we're developing new software, if we're developing new engines for cars, hybrids, then we want we want people to work towards targets and outcomes rather than specifications. But as soon as we get into the factory and we're producing those cars and engines, we want them to work to the specification. So there's a different mindset, there's a different focus. On the left, I'm going to give them a budget for research and development, and I'm going to focus on, is it ready yet? When will it be ready? When can I have it? Right? Time becomes the focus. If you were managing that, what type of controls are you likely to use? Anyway, how do you control that if you're a project manager? Agile controls? Time-based controls? A little sprint of work? See how far you can come? Measure it, inspect, adapt? Make sense? If you're on this side, what are you going to use? Come on, somebody's got to be from a manufacturing background. What was the big transformation in manufacturing?
The method of Henry Ford of dividing how people work on things, and they were only in one specific task as opposed to building a car altogether.
You're very generous to credit Henry Ford with that. That came from The Wealth of Nations, English guy. That was The Wealth of Nations, published in 1776. Division of Labour comes from that, right? The pin factory in Adam Smith. That's where that comes from. What Henry Ford did, Henry Ford was brilliant, right? Henry Ford said any colour, so long as it's black. Do you know why? No. No.
Faster to burn.
Oh, you're the first person that's ever got that right. That's why it was faster. And this is the key, reducing variety. There might be a laser here. Oh. Reducing variation. So what the other manufacturers were doing, even in the 1920s, is they said, yeah, you can have your car in any colour that you want. And Ford recognized that it took so long to change the paint colors and wash out all the things. He said, you can have any color as long as it's black. He only did that for a short time because he couldn't get away with it for long. So what he did was disruptive. He speeded up production by using one color. It was available and it worked. It was good quality. And he just said any color as long as it's black, just to get the production lines going faster to bring down the cost. So do you see how reducing variety in the, let's call it exploitive, exploiting your existing knowledge, reducing variety, and that's why we get this legacy of dividing labor, of having all the people in production on one side, in one department, under one management silo, where their special knowledge, skills, budgets, forms of control, ways of working are culturally unified, and all the people that are in research and innovation move on this side, and they work to a different budget and a different set of sensibilities. I'm seeing a couple of nods. This makes sense, right? So this is what I got. I came to research very, very late in life, and I was a little bit upset by how much knowledge was out there that I didn't realize was available. I kind of worked these things out from first principles and then discovered people have written this down before, right? So I'm not really making this up. What this has been called by academics is organizational ambidexterity. It is being good at doing these two seemingly incompatible things. Now, when the very first, it wasn't the first, but the second paper, but the biggest paper, came out in about 1996, and it came out in sort of one of the Harvard or one of the big, popular magazines, what they said was, this is how you achieve longevity in an organization. If you want your organization to survive for a long time, you're going to have to be good at both building new things and making the profits from those new things. And they said you have to be occasionally revolutionary and destroy all the things that you've built in order to go back to being evolutionary. Now, I'm not so sure that that's the case anymore, but nonetheless, that's when interest around organizational ambidexterity occurred. And then towards the end of the 90s, in fact, I can tell you exactly the year, 1999, there was a paper published about a Toyota factory in California. It's quite a famous factory. It's called NUMI, or it was called NUMI. It was run with American workers, but used the Japanese Toyota management system. What they did there was they had, the context was this. In America, they would change the model of the car every year. So every year is a different model. And they had to change all the presses and the dies and the things. So although they were very good at production, they were highly efficient in production, when it came to changing over the models, it took anything from 2 to 3 months. That's downtime. So over the course of a year, you suddenly got this big drop. Actually, Ford was slightly better. They were 2 months, Chrysler was 3 months. And what they decided to do at Toyota was they said, we need to get better at this. So we're efficient already in production. We now need to learn to be efficient at changeover. They called it routine work and non-routine work. How do they do it? Typical Toyota way. Now remember, Toyota, Japan after the war, right? Huge male-dominated ego, hierarchical structures. You do what you're very, very strict regime. Managers at all levels, workers across all the floors, worked out how to change these dies quicker and faster and better. They did training, they went to where they felt they were needed, they experimented, they had time to do it, and they had targets to increase the efficiency of changeovers. And this was the first example, really, of what is called, by the researchers, contextual ambidexterity, achieving this performance of seemingly opposite things, but within one business unit. They got it down to 5 days. Right? Now, to me, that's transformational. not only was it transformational for that factory, but of course it transformed the whole industry, because as soon as Chrysler saw that Toyota are doing it in 5 days and it's still taking us 3 months, guess what? Right. So I maintain that transformation is something that you see in the rear view mirror. You realize after it's happened. And that's certainly the case that I experienced at Transport for London. So some of you may have heard of one of our ex-prime ministers. We went through a series in the UK of quite a lot of prime ministers in a very short period. But Boris Johnson, before he became prime minister, was the mayor of London. They wanted to deliver, well, they had to deliver on his promise. So he got up and he said, by 2010, people travelling in London will only need one card to pay for all of their public transportation. I have to read this. At the time, TfL, Transport for London, operated just 270 underground stations. They operated the tube. Okay? What Boris had promised, and I don't even know if he knew this, but what he committed them to do in 9 months was expand the system to include 613 underground and mainline railway stations. Those railway stations were operated by 12 different train operating companies, all for profit. We had several hundred buses, a dozen trams, 3 riverboats, 1 cable car, and that amounted to more than 8 million routes through a system that all we ever used to care about was you go in the tube there and you come out there. So he committed us to that. They brought me in because obviously they knew I could develop enterprise software, so that was great. And we had one guy in the office who thought this might be possible. He was a genius, so that's fine. He'd worked it out on paper. Now what TfL did was they went, as usual, to their normal supplier of software, the company that developed all of their software in the past, Cubic Public Transport. And Cubic said, it's impossible, and we couldn't possibly do it in 9 months. Sorry. So they went to IBM, who said, we're not even going to bid on this. Right? Wasn't it the mother of invention, necessity, or something? They had no choice. They had to do something. So they gave it a go. And what Peter Svensson, the genius, and myself, what we did was we sat in the actual office where these systems were run. We worked with the people that ran those systems. We learned all of their stories. Look, in the first day, obviously we learned that people come along, they tap a card when they go into a system, and they tap a card when they get. So we learned that, that's great. And on the basis of that, you know where and when, and you calculate the fare. Easy. But then we started to hear about what happens when a parent wants to get their kids through the barrier. Our kids don't pay. But the parent doesn't think about that. The parent just wants to get their kids through the barrier. So the parent goes through first, taps in, goes through the barrier, hands the card back to the first kid, who tries to tap in again and get through. And do you see what I mean? And then there's the people that hop over the barriers going in and then try and put a card in going out. Or what happens during Notting Hill Carnival at the end of the summer, when you want to let people into the area, pay to get in, but you want them out quickly. So you open the gates and they never tap out, and they should be charged for the journey. All of this knowledge was in the brains of the people that operated the system, and they didn't really know how much knowledge they had until I turned it into a document like that, which one of them called the Grand Unifying Theory. And they didn't realize how valuable it was until we built the next system. And they realized this intellectual property is hugely valuable. Nobody else in the world has got this level of knowledge. We should protect it and license it. And they literally blocked off a corner of the room, put a lock on the door, and said, that's our IP vault. And of course, the Grand Unifying Theory was the first document that was in there. TFL today, so we delivered the system, it went live 2nd of January 2010, just as Boris said it had to. And on the basis of that, TFL said, we know how to develop systems now. It transformed Transport for London from just being an operator, so just the production side, to being an organisation that was able to develop its own software and operate it, and license and sell its IP and systems to cities across the world. And that happened within a very, very short time. So we started this in 2009. The first system was live in 2010. We had developed contactless fares. So bank issued cards were able, we didn't do it, but they were able to replace the Oyster card by 2012. We didn't go live on the tube in 2012 because, anybody remember what happened in London in 2012? Somebody said the Olympics. Yeah, Olympic Games. They didn't want to take the risk. We said, you're mad. We know the system works. It's really easy on buses. And we were like, this isn't fair. We've done all this work. We're ready. And they said, no, we're just going to go live on buses. Why we didn't want to go live on buses? It shows you nothing. You go onto the bus, you tap once, that's it. It's a flat fare across. It didn't show off what our system could do. The brains of our system was its ability to calculate a journey. We're so proud of this. 8 million routes, and we can work out where you've gone. No, we're going to go live on buses. Stupid bureaucracy. A year later, the figures came out. The Transport for London bus operators no longer needed to handle cash on buses. Saved almost the cost of £70 million of developing the whole network upgrade. It was about 26 million they saved just by getting rid of cash handling on buses. Now I call this emergent value. This was not the purpose of any of this work. It was something that emerged as a benefit. So I now start to think about all of this as you've got predictable value activities. If we're doing a digital transformation, Kayan's leading a digital transformation in a bank. We're going to close the branches and move people from physical to digital channels. We can predict how much we're going to save in rent, in salaries. It's predictable. So that's a predictable value activity, just like mass production and Henry Ford. But when we're doing this work that involves exploration and development as well, then the value is emergent, and we need different forms of control. So there you've got what our academics have shown us. There you've got this ambidextrous performance. Today in Transport for London, and these figures are available online, that's another thing that's happened, to your point, transparency. Our system just generates these figures, they're available online. The system is now calculating every day 2.5 million journeys. It's calculating the routes, the journeys, and it's billing the bank issued card at the end of every day. 2.5 million journeys a day. They asked us to design it for about 500,000. So that was transformational. The other thing that we've got very good evidence for is the field of DevOps. So I come from Agile and software development, but DevOps was sort of a specialization of that. And why I want to introduce it is because the research is very high quality. These people here, the DevOps survey, Dora, Nicole Forsgren et al., brought scientific method to measuring the impact. And this was really about delivering software more frequently. And this brought together, so this is also contextual ambidexterity. When I was a software developer in the 90s, we would develop some software, which of course is change, and we would throw it over the fence. Remember this? Throw it over the fence to the operations people who would go, no! Don't want that near our production system, it's going to break, because it usually did. And when it broke, they used to have to go and find out why it broke and then come back to us and say, oh, could you fix this? And then we'd have to write some more code and that would have to be released. And you had this backwards and forwards, them and us. I love them and us because you could talk to either side and say, tell us about them. And they go, oh yeah, they're terrible, right? Tell us about them. Yeah, they're terrible. It's lovely, right? And this is what we get with silos. And it's very tempting to blame hierarchy for silo culture, but hierarchy is how we got large organizations. You can't build really a large single organization without silos. Let me rephrase that. The easiest way that we know how is to use hierarchy to build a large organization. You want to buy a smaller company, right? You buy 100,000 people, but you only have one extra person at your top table. It's very scalable. So hierarchies solve a real problem. But now I'm just talking about what happened in tech. By bringing together the development and operations silos, teams, managers, all the rest of it, by bringing them together and collapsing them into a single team, you could give that team an ambidextrous purpose. Your job is to build and run the systems that we need, right? There's a smile of recognition there. And that's been transformational. And we've got the numbers to prove it. So when high-performing DevOps teams are measured, what we find is that they develop and release software 1,000 times faster than the lowest performers. Now that doesn't mean that they're building 1,000 pieces of software. That means they can deliver changes from we're definitely going to do that to it's in customers' hands. So that's the journey. And they're doing 1,000 of those for every one that the low-performing teams, usually separate, do. Not only that, but that software travels through the development and release system 6,500 times faster. And the small print says, no, that's not a typo. 6,500 times faster. That's speed to market, if you like. And when it does go into production, it creates problems 1/3 less times. Nobody predicted that, but it's a fantastic performance increase. Now, why all of this matters now and in the context of people like Kyan who are professional transformers, and it wasn't fair putting me on after Picasso with those beautiful, beautiful drawings, is I think this: we've moved from an era where in the machine age, you really, as an executive perhaps, you really had to form a strategy over a number of years. You had to predict what the market wanted to buy so that your managers could plan how to make the machines that were going to make those products, and marketing could build the marketing campaigns. And with all of those plans in place, you then had to control reality to make sure they fit the plans. This is very much predictable value. And it was a 3 to 5 year horizon. And if you were lucky, you got 5 to 10 years worth of profits coming back. In the digital age, strategies emerge from the bottom up. So think about that TFL story. We realized, as developers, we realized that one of the things that the new system could offer is a weekly cap. So if your spending during the week reached a certain limit, we could just stop charging you. Well, they were never able to do anything longer than each journey. And for us, it was easy. We just go, yeah, we'll write another business rule. Would you like it? And they go, you can really do that? Yeah. Okay, so opportunities emerge. They emerge bottom up, and strategy changes. So there is some work that suggests that the faster the pace of the market, right, the more bottom up and the more change, the more dynamic you've got to be. And that means that the manager's role changes from trying to optimize for efficiency, because remember, you've got these 2, 3, 4, 5-year plans to optimize your costs. Your designs have to be in place, your materials are expensive, people are expensive, and the product is expensive. So you're optimizing always for efficiency, to now you want to optimize for emergence and adaptability. We used to have managers that knew how to do all of the jobs that they managed. So Fred Winslow Taylor, scientific management, some more recognition around the room, he was very clear. Managers are responsible for designing the most efficient way of doing things because they know best. Culturally, ignore the tensions, do what your manager tells you because they know best. To today, a lot of our activities, the manager can't possibly do. Technology changes far too fast. I wouldn't trust myself near a computer to program today. And I was programming right up until 2012, so that's not very long. What managers have to do instead is they have to optimize for emergence. They want those great ideas to bubble up, and they want adaptability. And you'll probably hear today and tomorrow, I'm sure you're going to hear people talk about adaptive space, ecosystems. You've heard about these things, right? Ecosystems. Instead of one organization controlling all of their suppliers and saying, you will deliver this to this, according to this governance, they're now saying, we want to create these products and we're all going to do it, but there's no master contractor. We're all in this together. So it's a loose arrangement, ecosystem. Very interesting trend amongst organizations. And that's that at that level. And in fact, at the moment, there's a conference in Berlin, a security conference, and they're talking about all of the different tensions around the world. And again, it's the same sort of thing. How can we work together as representatives of different countries and agencies to do this? So we have the same thing within teams and departments. Managers are managing for emergence. And the key to doing that is managing tensions, not managing people. And I maintain that this is now a both and. So go back to Henry Ford's days, it really was just stay far left. There was some innovation, maybe 10% innovation needed, but it was 90% just, machine age, operations, production. Nowadays, we're moving more to a mix 70-30. Maybe if you're in tech, in software, maybe it's 50-50 already. And that means managers have to be able to do both and. And that's something we've never really seen before from management. And as I'm interviewing managers, that's what I'm finding, that they're doing it. So in my research, I found hundreds of tensions, individual tensions, and I boiled them down to 6 core tensions. The first 3, essentially, I'm going to tell you, we can solve those with lean, agile methods that we all know about. They're fine. The most interesting and the biggest opportunity for transformation is this one. You'll all think of it as mindset, and I'm going to challenge that because we don't want to change mindsets. We want to invite people with a fixed mindset who believe that they know what the right thing to do is. We want them to stop and think and become people with thinking minds. And the best way to do that is an A/B test. I know you've always done it like this, but what if, right? And can we measure it? And that way you avoid all of the egos and the biases. You mentioned a lot of biases, all those kind of challenges. And we just go, let's run an experiment and see what happens. So A/B testing is a great way to nudge and shift the way that people think. The stuff down the very bottom is tricky. On the old maps, they would say, here be dragons. This is because this starts to touch on our core beliefs. So we all, if we've got a machine, if you're driving a car, an old petrol engine car, and you know that it's near the upper limit of its engine's capacity, you're not going to push it very much more. But we don't do that for people, teams, and particularly ourselves. Just do a little bit more. We push ourselves just that little bit harder because we don't have that sense that we're nearing capacity. I think the same is true with the Earth's resources. We need the resources, but we want to preserve them. And we're not sure how much to take, except that at the moment we have the feeling that we've probably gone too far. And that brings us on quite nicely to this idea, which is the paradoxical tension. Is we can be in one side or another. We can be great at innovation or great at production. And it's possible to be so focused on what we're doing that we lose sight of the bigger picture. And I love this yin yang, which is the female and the male and the night and the dark and the hot and the cold. Both together are bigger than each part. And when one of those parts becomes too dominant, too full of itself, it puts the whole system out of balance, and then we have to step back and redress that balance. So my takeaway from this is look for paradoxical tensions, and instead of ignoring them, instead of digging down and saying, but we're right and they're wrong, instead of that is go, how can we step above this and go, that's a tension worth exploring and worth balancing out. How can we move from where we are now to managing that tension? And I put it to you, and this is a lovely audience because you all are in the digital transformation, you all understand transformation. I put it to you that the outcome that firms want from transformation is this. They want to be ambidextrously performant. They want to be both efficient in normal production, but they also want to be efficiently adaptable. So we want to be agile, if you like, but we don't want to incur huge costs. And I think that this is a virtuous cycle, because once you've learnt to be efficiently adaptable and efficient in all things, you then become able to recognize how tensions are the drivers of that change. You get to learn how to use those tensions as a topic for discussion. Yeah? And that then helps you become more ambidextrous in more varieties of tensions. So I think this is one of those win-win-win situations. So my takeaways for managers, about 3 minutes, Ken? 2 minutes?
Yep.
My takeaways for managers are threefold. Number one, shape the context of work for success. That's what a manager can do today. They probably can't solve any problems. So shape the context for people to succeed. And typically that means make sure that everybody in your reporting line knows what's most important right now. And then ask them what they understand that means. Then ask them what they need to be effective. And they will tell you. They might tell you they need training or tools or support or a day off because they need to pick up the kids. Whatever that is, listen. And then, finally, can't remember finally, maybe I said 3 things. Next thing is pursue both and outcomes. And this is really a shift from, if you think about it, traditional management tends to be either or. We're either going to do this or we're going to do that. And it tends to be a decision that is either made from above and passed down, or it's a decision that is not made at the factory level and has to go up, and then you've got to wait for it to go across, down another silo, and then come back, right? And that's very slow. So see if there's a way, as a manager, see if there's a way to look for an outcome that can be both and. Just look for those opportunities and just use the language. Could we do both this and that? So in my research, I was really surprised how many managers told me that hybrid working was still a problem. I thought it was done, but no, apparently it's still a problem. People apparently, since the pandemic, they've gotten used to being able to sometimes pick up their kids. And they like it, but they also know that they need to go into the office and collaborate with the colleagues. And this is the third and final point, is I met one manager who said, I don't have any answers to that. I've got 40 people that report to me, several teams, and I don't have any answers, so I've asked them to solve it. And I said, how's that going? And he said, well, they still haven't really come up with anything. We keep making changes, they change the core working hours, they do these things. And I said, are you happy with that? He said, absolutely, I'm part of those discussions, and we're still experimenting. And I think that's right. I think as long as you keep on changing, you're developing those muscles that allow you to adapt, and you're becoming used to it. So practicing adaptability really, I think, makes you better at adaptability. And I leave you with this. And I find this very positive. You know, I'm very happy to have found this research and being able to explain the how of transformation. Please get in touch with me. I'm sure that I've opened up some crazy ideas or some things that you want to disagree with or whatever. Get in touch. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to discuss it. I'm still interviewing and, of course, still transform organizations. The book in the middle is very much those different tensions. It's not based on this talk, but the tensions that I told you about, the beliefs at the bottom and the forces that managers can change being in the middle. It's a very little book. The book that will eventually come out from this work is going to be called Manage Tensions, Not People. Kai's looking at his watch, so I'm going to assume that that's my cue. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Please have your questions.